It is terrific to be back in Sri Lanka as you mark the 75th anniversary of Sri Lankan independence. I don't have to tell you that this is obviously a critical moment for your country as the government works with the IMF and international creditors to stabilize the economy and to put Sri Lanka back on a path to stability, recovery, and growth. It's also a vital time for Sri Lanka to strengthen its democracy, its governance, and reconciliation. This includes proceeding with local elections this March, giving people across the country a voice in their future, starting of the national dialogue on reconciliation, which needs to show results for all Sri Lankans, and proceeding with reform of the PTA so that it meets international standards. Today, we had a chance to meet with President Wickremesinghe to talk about U.S. ongoing support for Sri Lanka at this complex time, and particularly our support for quick conclusion of your negotiations with the IMF. I was also honored to be able to let him know and to announce to all of you today that the U.S. will be contributing an additional $30 million to go towards school lunches for 96,000 students across Sri Lanka in 850 public schools. We are also beginning to see, including today, the delivery of 770 metric tons of fortified rice and vegetable oil to meet food security needs. And this is on top of more than $240 million in support that the United States has provided to Sri Lanka just over the last year. In addition to seeing the president this morning, I also had a chance, along with Ambassador Chung, to sit with a broad cross-section of ethnic minority leaders to talk about national reconciliation, to talk about land return, to talk about accountability and the various issues that they are discussing with the government. We then had lunch with Foreign Minister Sabri and with the central bank governor and with the Secretary of the Treasury. Obviously, those conversations focused on regional issues, on global issues, but also on the IMF negotiations and the strong impulse for recovery and growth here. But the most inspiring meeting of the day was the last meeting that Ambassador Chung and the delegation and I had, which was with a dozen young Sri Lankan climate activists and entrepreneurs who are doing everything from recovering plastics in the ocean to advancing climate education across the country, to farming seaweed as a new product of growth and aquaculture here in Sri Lanka. These young people, are coming up with concrete solutions, not just for Sri Lanka's issues, but for problems of climate change across the globe. And it was really inspiring to be with them. Let me just conclude by saying that last summer, the Sri Lankan people made clear their desire for a cleaner, more accountable government and a more prosperous and inclusive democracy here. The U.S. is proud to be Sri Lanka's partner as you do the hard work, and we know it is hard work, to secure the future that all Sri Lankans deserve. Thanks. I'd be happy to take some questions.
China says that they will give a 2-year moratorium, and India too has given an assurance. And we saw that the IMF has already released their disbursement for Bangladesh. But Sri Lanka is still waiting to overcome this crisis. What is your stance on this?
We want to see an IMF agreement as quickly as possible. That's what Sri Lanka deserves. That's what Sri Lanka needs. We, the United States, are prepared to do our part. Our Paris Club partners are prepared to do their part. India has made strong commitments that it will provide the credible assurances that the IMF is looking for. What China has offered so far is not enough. As I said before, we need to see credible and specific assurances that they will meet the IMF standard of debt relief.
Hi, just want to know more about the climate action program towards Sri Lanka, what you had discussed with the activists.
So we are talking not just to Sri Lanka, but to island nations around the world who are, I don't have to tell you, facing extreme circumstances as a result of climate change. So we were able today to learn from some of the research that your climate activists have been involved in, but also to learn about some of the solutions they're pursuing. So everything from collecting plastics and recycling those that they can and reusing others and the need to do that across Sri Lanka, to finding new ways to use the sea appropriately as a resource for prosperity and growth. So we met with one young man who's pursuing seaweed as a crop and also a producer of something that soaks up CO2 and produces oxygen, and also provides employment for women and others who are misplaced and don't have the employment opportunities. So it really was quite inspiring what is happening here. And the network that we sponsor with U.S. government funds not only promotes their work individually, but also brings them together as a community that can work together to advance these issues and advance appropriate legislation and support from the Sri Lankan government, educate the Sri Lankan people, but also represent your learning out in the world as everybody tries to meet these challenges. So it was really fun.
We just started negotiation with the government president regarding the Hurricane solution to the Northeast issue. What did they share with you? Are they happy with the negotiation, or what did they say?
Well, I'm going to let them speak for themselves in terms of their specific recommendations. What I would say is that I found this group of minority leaders in general glad that they are in consultation with the government, but eager to see those consultations start to produce real results for people on the ground, and particularly in the area of returning land, etc. So we obviously encouraged that dialogue to continue, but for the group to work together to offer concrete solutions that will meet the needs of their communities to the government in these conversations so that they begin to become a little bit more concrete. All right, thanks everybody. Really great to be back in Sri Lanka.
The News Reporter. වාරණයෙන් තොර අපක්ෂපාතී වාර්තාකරණය.